Our next guest is a seasoned journalist who's traveled the country covering high-profile Senate and presidential races. Now, as the White House bureau chief at Politico, she's bringing her expertise to her new podcast, The Conversation. Please welcome Dasha Burns. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for calling me seasoned. I'm feeling a little spicy today.
I know. You seem a little too young to be seasoned, but you are. And I've followed your career. We've worked together in the past. You became White House bureau chief for Politico in January, and you've covered President Trump for the last two election cycles. You're extremely well-sourced throughout Washington, D.C., and across the country, I should say. Donald Trump is kind of employing this, what we talk about in The View a lot, flood the zone strategy that makes it so hard to even follow all the news that's breaking at any moment. So as a journalist, how do you decide what stories are most important to cover, and how do you cover everything that's happening and coming out of this White House?
I think that's the hardest part, right? Because any given day, there are like 5 different stories that would have taken up like 3 weeks of a news cycle in any other administration. And like we had the Elon Musk-Trump feud last week, right? So we have to think about that story. Obviously, the internet was obsessed. We all love the memes. But at the same time, there's a travel ban that Trump just put in place from a bunch of countries. There's this immigration fight, this escalation of deportations. And so we can't just get distracted by the shiny thing. That doesn't mean we don't. I think that's something that we all need to be consciously thinking about all of the time. It's like, okay, we got to cover the immediate breaking news, but how do you also think about what's actually impacting people day to day, and just the challenge of sourcing and building those relationships in this like very hot environment.
It's so crazy you say that, because I almost have forgotten that there was already this travel ban that was put in place, because just the flood of news
it moves
that
so
we're getting.
fast. It moves so fast.
So I obviously worked in the White House. You've been covering it. Can you walk folks through what like an average day is like when you're there covering as like a White House reporter? Because I don't think people realize what it's actually like.
It's wild. I mean, first of all, now with Trump, like I wake up and the first thing I do is what was Truth on Truth Social at 3 a.m. How many different monologues have we do we need to catch up on? Then I usually go to the White House, start talking to the people in lower press and upper press. You've got Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, that does actually engage with us fairly regularly. They've made a bunch of changes to how the press shop works, but they are fairly accessible. And then I'm at source meetings all of the time. I mean, the thing about this White House is because there's more skepticism of the mainstream media, the building of the relationships is so important. So my day never really actually ends. Like when there's a lid at the White House, I'm still going out and getting drinks or getting dinner with people, trying to like make everyone feel like a human being. And then there's a fun challenge of, because the briefing room is so jam-packed and these gaggles are so crazy, like we have to think of strategies to kind of stand out. So number one, color, like all of the like the smart ladies start. I mean, highlighter green, highlighter pink, bright blue. I bought like the tallest heels I could find for when we're standing on like platforms that are like 5 inches, so I can, because we've got some towering guys too. And then in the briefing room itself, I'm in the third or fourth row, third row. And the front row's all TV press, and again, some tall dudes there. So I'll make a small confession. I was like, how do I problem solve for this and like make sure Caroline sees me and I get my questions in? I bought myself a little booster seat.
I love that. I love that. We're improvising on the fly. You've got to ask
creative
those questions.
solutions. This is journalism is mostly problem solving. Creative problem solving.
Well, covering the second Trump term is even more challenging in many ways than the first, because they've taken a different approach with the media. There were obviously a lot of those battles, yanking some credentials the first term, but now there's really this sort of standoff with the Associated Press. They've been not allowing them on Air Force One. It's now gone to litigation. They've also introduced this new media seats where they're bringing in some new outlets, ones like Axios that are great, and I think a lot of us rely on, and some that are probably, I think are fair to say, are highly partisan. How do you navigate being part of the mainstream media, getting the answers you need from this administration, but also kind of standing by the other media folks in the room and having each other's backs?
The relationship between Trump and the media is so much more complicated than you can explain in like one sentence, right? Because on the one hand, he's the originator of fake news and a lot of the distrust of the press. At the same time, he is one of the most accessible presidents that any of us can remember. I mean, I called him on the phone on Friday and he picked up and like talked to me. Like I don't think anyone can name anybody else that would do that. But the bringing in of new media, on the one hand, I think is important. I'm glad they did it because the landscape is changing. I mean, I went from NBC to Politico. That was seen as like an exotic move, but it's not what it used to be. It's the wild, wild west of the press. So I think that's in part a good idea. But the thing is, you get such limited time to ask questions of the people in power, and when you're in that room, you are asking for the American people.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that the questions you're asking are of value to the American people. And I think that's where some of the challenge is.
Definitely. And on this idea of new media, because obviously you're launching the conversation, your podcast, in Politico, I think I still consider it new media. That probably makes me old, though, that I'm like, you're kind of part of the new guys.
I did watch a clip the other day of Mike Allen when he was at Politico asking George Bush a question and saying, I'm from Politico.com. And Bush going, Politico.com? What is that?
I know. I'm like, you've come a long way. But this has kind of become a moment in politics where new media is driving so much. One of the many postmortems that there have been on the 2024 election was the role Joe Rogan played, Alex
Theo
Cooper
Vaughn.
did, Theo Vaughn and others. And politicians have had to think about how they utilize new media to their benefit. For a traditional journalist who has to be, adhere to the strict editorial standards you do and objectivity, how do you navigate that new landscape?
I think journalism is journalism. If you've decided you are going to be a reporter, now if you're an editorial opinion person, if you're a pundit, if you're an operative, that's a different story. But if you're decided to be a reporter, I think no matter if I quit tomorrow and just started a TikTok account, I would go through the same, I do have a TikTok account, but if I was only on TikTok, right, I would go through the same steps of reporting, of making sure I have the right sources, of making sure I'm triple fact checking, of trying to get documents where I can, no matter what platform you're reporting for. I think that's the important thing that I worry might get lost as everyone with a phone and a microphone thinks that they're a journalist.
Right.
If you can do that, but make sure you're going through the proper steps.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks forget the actual fact checking that goes into real journalism versus kind of opinion having and influencing. But tell us about the podcast. What made you want to start it, and what are the kind of conversations that we can expect to hear on it?
Yeah, the conversation. It's a very punnable title.
Yes.
I always loved the Sunday shows, right? Meet the Press, Face the Nation, all of those, and had dreams as a young journalist of hosting one of those one day. But I've seen how much the landscape is changing. And I kind of wanted to play with the idea of an anti-Sunday show Sunday show. Like a place where it's less about the sound bites, more about the substance, where people can kind of relax in the chair and have a real exchange with another human being, where it's not combative, but it is curious. That doesn't mean I don't ask tough questions, but you get a minute to go deeper. I mean, we had Dr. Oz on the show. We went deep on drug pricing, on Medicaid and Medicare, on Harvard, his alma mater, and how the Trump administration is targeting universities. So it's the kind of conversation that you probably just wouldn't get to on a Sunday show. Like, he talked about his reverence almost for the government workers that he met when he came into CMS, right? Like, that was surprising to me, first of all. And second of all, I just don't think you would get to that in a 5-minute segment on broadcast news. And so it's kind of this space where people can have a different kind of chat.
Yeah, it's great that you're already pulling such heavy hitters. Dasha, it's been great to talk to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, you can listen to The Conversation wherever you get your podcasts, with new episodes dropping every Sunday. Have a great day.